Hello, and so I am here today with another one of my lovely graduates from the Yoga for Cancer Academy Teacher Training Course. So I'm here today with Wendy Ranft-Gerber, and she is a health and cancer coach and a yoga teacher specializing in cancer and based in the Isle of Man. So Wendy, welcome. Lovely to see you again. How are you doing?
Hello, Jenny. Thank you very much. Yes, lovely to see you again as well. Thank you. And I'm very well. Very well. All going well. So yes, lots to talk about today, and I'm really looking
Yes, we
forward to
have.
that.
We have. So the way I generally start these conversations, and it's interesting because it's different for everybody, is what was it that drew you to doing the training in the first place?
Um, so if I go back just a little bit
Yeah,
before the
of
yoga for cancer,
course.
is that okay?
Of course.
Um, so if I go back to kind of where my yoga journey started, really, so I became a yoga teacher back in, oh gosh, it must have been about 2012 now, 2011, round about there. And a couple of things led me to yoga in terms of going to a yoga class. So I was doing a lot of running at the time, and I started suffering quite badly from sciatica. And someone said to me, "Oh, why don't you go try a yoga class?" So the first thing that kind of drew me to a yoga practice was the physical side of things. So I started going to a yoga class and then started doing a regular practice. But then I also noticed that from both a emotional and a mental side, the benefits that I was getting from yoga. And so I started to develop quite a regular yoga practice. And then there was an opportunity for me to study as a yoga teacher through a redundancy that I went through at the time, and I decided to do my 200-hour teacher training, which I did on the Isle of Man. And I was really grateful that I had done that at the time because my dad became quite unwell.
Mm.
Um, and so yoga started to kind of influence how I dealt with with that, my dad's chronic illness at the time. Um, and he sadly passed away shortly after that. And so yoga became quite a prevalent part of kind of my life, really. So that's where my yoga journey started originally, from going to a class, then teacher training. And so over the years, I've done lots of other teacher trainings as well to develop my practice, but also to look at different ways of helping people.
Mm.
And so kind of fast forward, I guess, to where we are now. Um, and probably about maybe 5 years ago, when quite a few of my close friends were going through cancer. And I was very fascinated by kind of the journey that they were going on, and the support that they were having, and also the gaps that there were in terms of some of the support during their treatment, but
Mhm.
also following their treatment. And again, through a redundancy, about 3 years ago, I decided that actually I wanted to do something different with my life,
Yeah.
um, and leave the corporate world behind and do something more with my yoga. Um, and so that kind of led me to the journey of doing the teacher training with yourself
Yeah.
towards the end of last year.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how these completely unplanned for life events kind of open doors that we might not have envisaged before. And I'm curious about that experience with your dad as well. Like, did that start to open up the sort of lived reality of yoga as more than a physical practice and being that kind of mental, emotional, spiritual support through difficult situations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me at the time, because I was so far away from it, so my dad had had a stroke, and quite an aggressive stroke.
Mm,
And I'm from South Africa originally. And so the first thing for me was to try and get back to South Africa as quickly as I could. Um, and yeah, and to kind of support my mum through that process. But what yoga taught me in terms of, I guess, seeing my dad in a way that, no daughter really wants to see their
mm,
parent. It kind of just grounded me, I guess, Jenny, as part of the whole experience, and it helped me to look at life, look at purpose, my own purpose, really, um, a bit more, and also how I could kind of bring the emotional side, the mental side, the spiritual side into that journey in terms of supporting others. So
yeah.
supporting my mum, who became a full-time carer after my dad had his first stroke. My mum became my dad's full-time carer, really. And so it was, yeah, bringing elements of my yoga practice into supporting others in that situation, from a chronic illness perspective. So that feeling of being grounded, that feeling of, using your breath in those moments where
Mm,
things can become a bit overwhelming. Not just the physical side of yoga, but absolutely that spiritual, emotional, mental side. Um, Giving people that space so they have time for themselves as well.
yeah.
And I guess that kind of then led me down a path of starting to question a little bit about my own life purpose,
Yeah.
um, and where I wanted to be spending, my future self and my future time, um, and what that would look like for me. So I guess in a roundabout way, my dad having his stroke and the effect and the impact that that had on
Mm,
him, but also everybody around him. Um, and he never recovered from that stroke. It was extremely aggressive. He had another stroke, um, which he didn't recover from at all. And so, although it wasn't cancer,
mm,
it was still a chronic illness that I'd kind of seen happen to somebody I really loved and cared about, seeing what that did to them and
mm,
those around them, where the gaps were in some of the support systems and what was available at the time, but also actually facing mortality at the end of it,
mhm.
which can be really, really difficult. Um,
It's,
yeah, and so yoga really supported me on that journey. Um,
yeah.
Emotionally more than the physical side, and that's when I realized, actually, there really is more to yoga, even though we learn about that in our teacher
Yeah.
training. When you can kind of bring it to life and you experience something like that, it really hits home in terms of how powerful yoga can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many overlaps with any chronic illness. And we talked in the course about that holistic impact, not just on the patient, but everyone around them as well. And you also mentioned about friends experiencing cancer as well. And I'm curious about because it varies so much depending on location, what the gaps in support and care you noticed in those situations?
Yeah, so interestingly, I've had friends go through, so I've had three friends actually, two very close friends, and another friend, not so close, but still friends, go through breast cancer. That spans the last 10 years. I've had one friend go through colon cancer and bowel cancer, and I've had another friend who had lung cancer. And so their cancer diagnosis all different, and their journey is very unique to them. But in terms of the support, the one thing from all of them that stood out for me was the medical system, and the availability of that was really good. But the gaps that there were and are the bits that the medical system doesn't pick up. So you get your diagnosis, you have your treatment plan, and you kind of go through your treatment. And once you've done that, that's it. You're out on your own. And it's that kind of the aftermath, I guess, of that. So that support that people need, but also somebody being with them throughout that process. Somebody who may not necessarily be family or a friend, but somebody that they can go to for that support. And that led me down the cancer coaching side as well. And so that's how I've kind of brought the cancer coaching into the yoga side, and where the two work really, where I've seen them work really, really well. So in terms of the support and the system and what is available, you know, the medical system and the resources that people have and the experiences that people have had, mostly very positive. It's the bit where the medical system isn't able to give that additional level of support where the big gap is. And that's where, as a yoga for cancer teacher or a cancer health coach, we can add so much value and support somebody in a way that you know, the medical service can't.
Yeah, that very much reflects my experience over the years, and what people have said to me was, you know, they may have been super happy with their surgeon, they have their oncology nurse they can call, they've had the medicine available that they needed, but that more holistic, you know, the impact of dealing with that diagnosis and the treatment, it's really sort of traumatic, and it throws your life off kilter for a year or two. I think sometimes people don't realize how long the process is from beginning to end, assuming the treatment's successful and there is an end to it. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack at the end of that process, because when they're in that survival mode of just deal with the next step, deal with the next appointment, and there's not the time always to process everything. And so this is all building up in the background, and at the end, maybe when they've reached safe ground, it all can come spilling out. And that's where the medical system, sadly, has sort of withdrawn, because they're moving on to the next patients who are in treatment, and they just sort of feel a bit marooned at a point where emotionally there's so much support needed. That's why I love our yoga practice, because we can be there with them through the whole journey, kind of through their treatment, as a place to maybe unpack a little bit as they go, but then they can carry on afterwards and get that support, and the rehab and the building back of, you know, all those different layers of themselves. No,
Yeah,
that
and
makes sense.
I often say to people, you know, it's not like you've got a broken bone, you know, it's not like you've broken your arm, or you go to the doctor, they say, okay, you're going to have your arm in a cast for like, you know, 6 weeks or whatever it is. You're then going to go and get some physio, and then you'll be back to using your arm, you know, within 8 to 12 months or whatever the prediction is. Some people might be shorter, some people might be longer. With cancer, there's this kind of no end date, really. And because everybody is so unique, their experience and their journey is unique, how the treatment affects them is very individual to them. There's no kind of, okay, your treatment's done and therefore you're all better now. You know, there is no end date. For some people, that emotional side, they might take them years to work through that. Some people, it might take months to work through that. And so I often say to people, you know, don't compare yourself to other people. Look at you as an individual, because you are unique. Your story is unique. Your journey is unique. And how the diagnosis affects you will be very unique to you. And we all deal with these things differently. And I think that's where the yoga for cancer is such an amazing space for people, really, because although everybody's going through their treatment plan, what they're going through is quite unique to them. And it creates that space for people where there are like-minded individuals coming together in a space and in an environment where they can just be, and they feel safe in that space. And I've seen through my teaching, and I've been teaching since February, actually. So only really, you know, from February to April, we're not talking, you know, years of teaching. But in the time I have been teaching, and the people that have been coming to my class from the first class I ran, and have continued to come every Tuesday and every Wednesday, I've seen the difference and the change. And from the physical side, but also most importantly from that emotional side, that mental side. And I think for me, that is what makes the difference. Being in that, being able to provide that for people, being able to support somebody through that journey in that way.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, I think that's what makes it such a joyful kind of profession. I think a lot of people, when I first tell them that I work with cancer, assume it's like, oh, that must just be like very heavy and serious, and you know, and I said, no, actually it's so rewarding, it's so joyful. And yeah, seeing that change in people, seeing them get their confidence back, seeing their energy change, their body language change, the way they carry themselves in and out of a room. You know, you can see some lightness coming back to people, and you know, a bit of laughter, a bit of cheekiness, and you know, all of those things. Yeah, that makes it really enjoyable for me, definitely, just on a professional basis. And I wanted to ask you as well, so obviously you've really been finding your niche in these last few years of working with cancer, and that you have your cancer coaching as well as the yoga. So I'm assuming there's quite a bit of overlap potentially in those two trainings, or were they, or do you feel they were very different from each other?
I think at the time, I did my cancer coaching training first, And I was trying to find my niche when I
Yeah.
qualified as a health coach two years ago now, believe it or not. So 2 years ago I qualified. Then last year I was setting up my business and getting that off the ground and trying to find my niche. And I got into the cancer space because as I mentioned earlier, I had friends who had been diagnosed with cancer, but also people started to have conversations with me about it. And I just thought, oh, this is interesting. I need to do a bit more
Mm-hmm.
work here in terms of cancer and working with people with cancer. And that opened the cancer space for me. So I found a cancer coaching certificate, and I did that. And then at the same time, when I just finished that, I came across your training, and I was like, okay, this is a sign, right? So I'm going to do Jenni's training. And then as I was going through the yoga for cancer training, I started to then realize how the two actually complement each other quite well. Because you I guess from a cancer coaching point of view, you going through the process that we cover quite a bit about what a cancer patient's journey looks like. As a cancer coach, your role in that journey, where you can support them. So it covers quite a lot of aspects. And then when we started with the teacher training with yourself, some of that was like, okay, so this is working really nicely, because again, you can bring all of that into the yoga for cancer, but also you can have really informed conversations with people around. So you end up in the cancer, the yoga for cancer class, having conversations and start almost coaching people, I guess, through their journey, because you have that understanding. And you can then see it play out in that space. So it's really it's interesting to watch, because actually on the back of that, I have started working with people and supporting people from a cancer coaching perspective. And so the two, I think, complement each other really well.
And I'm presuming with your coaching, part of your prescription, for want of a better word, can be yoga practices.
Absolutely. And things like breathing. So a lot of people come to me and they say to me, oh, wow, that was just amazing. It got me thinking about the sequence we did on the chair. Although I couldn't do a lot of the physical stuff, the one thing I did do was I could really feel the connection of my feet onto the mat. And that made me really think about my breath. I've never thought about my breath in that way. It made me really connect with my breath. And we take it for granted, really, in terms of, you just breathe every day, you breathe in, you breathe out. We can feel, our bodies in a certain way, and we connect with our breath. But when someone says to you, I couldn't move a lot, but I did connect with my breath and I could really feel myself in that moment, it's like, yay. Your breath is so important. And so I will often start a coaching session just with some breath work. Let's just connect with our breath. Let's just ground ourselves before we start our coaching session. And when somebody leaves, depending on how the session went, let's just end with some breath work. And as part of their coaching plan, if that's something that they want to then take with them, they can, because they've got that now. They can use it as a tool in those moments where they just need to connect with their body and their breath. They know how to do that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think is so lovely with yoga generally in a cancer setting, is that we can very easily give people these little tools that they take away with them to use when they need it. Like if they're sat there waiting for medical results or in the waiting room, I can imagine the sweaty palms and the palpitations, and say, oh, okay, let's put my feet on the floor. Let's remember that simple breath. And it's such a nice way to empower people to have a little bit of control over their well-being, which is
Yeah.
so satisfying. So I also wanted to ask you, because I think you've achieved a lot in those few months since you finished the course. Because we'd wrapped up your course just before Christmas. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so really you've just had the first quarter of this year. And I know you've been a busy bee on the Isle of Man.
Just a bit.
some connections, because I remember on the course you were talking about the fact that you could see there was a real gap in services in your area, and that's very often the case, to be honest. Outside of the medical services, there's often not a lot else.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me a bit more, or share with our listeners about how you've been doing a little bit of outreach in your community and making connections, and you have a few different classes going on now.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting one, Jenny, because most people who know me won't maybe think that I'm not an outgoing person, if that makes sense. And I'll kind of all be clear as I continue with the conversation. But yeah, so last year I did all the did the course and everything, and I was like, right, okay, I really want to make this work now, and I'm determined to make this work. And the only way I was going to start to make this work was to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and start to connect with people face to face. It's the best way really on the Isle of Man is face to face. We're a small community. And also, I've got a business mentor, and they say to me, Wendy, but you know so many people, just go and speak to them. And I was like, yes, I know, but it's quite daunting to just go and speak to them. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there, and what's the worst that can happen? People just say no, or they'll say they don't have time, and that's okay. I can deal with that. And so I did just that, Jenny. I remember I had to give myself a little bit of a talking to. So right, I can do this. Got my yoga for cancer bag around my shoulder with everything, all my tools in there, and off I went to our local hospital, Nobles Hospital. And within Nobles Hospital, they had got a Macmillan support center, and they've also got a breast clinic unit. And I was like, right, that's it. I'm just going to walk in there and I'm going to go and speak to people. Luckily, they received me with open arms. So I did. I went and I started talking. I went up to the breast unit, the breast clinic, and I spoke to one of the senior nurses there, introduced myself, told them what I did, and left some of my leaflets there with them. I then went into the Macmillan Centre and started a conversation with one of the Macmillan support staff. And that conversation then ended up going, oh, Wendy, you need to speak to Tom at the National Sports Centre, who runs these Healthy for Life classes, because I really think we can do something in the yoga for cancer space at the NSC. And I was like, oh, okay. So I rang Tom at the NSC, our National Sports Centre on the island. We then met for a coffee and a chat in December. And off the back of that, I started teaching yoga for cancer classes through Macmillan at the National Sports Centre. So I just went and put myself out there, Jenny, out of my comfort zone, went and started speaking to people. And so I built that network now with Macmillan on the island. And I run a regular class at the National Sports Centre. And then I also do another yoga for cancer class in a local studio where I teach from time to time. And went and spoke to Dee Stockman, who is the owner of Space Yoga Studio on the island. And I said to her, look, you know, would you be interested to hold a space for me where I could do this class? And she was like, absolutely, yes, please come and do it at my studio. And so that's how I've started that class. So 2 classes, just by putting myself out there, going to speak to people and just taking a chance.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's so true what you say about just looking into the worst case scenario, because these things, they are frightening if we're not naturally a performer and, you know, comfortable putting ourselves out there. But yeah, just that very simple question of, well, what's the worst thing? They're just going to be too busy, or they'll just say, no, we don't need it. Like, it's actually not the end of the world to go out there. And you can just say, well, if something like, here's my number, here's my email, you know, if circumstances change, get in touch. And making those connections, I think,
Absolutely,
all the difference.
And I mention it, I'm a bit more confident, and I mention it a lot more now than I did before. And I think part of that is I'm not somebody who, I'm not a natural salesperson, if that makes sense. So I'm not somebody, it feels quite uncomfortable for me to kind of sell my services. It's not something that comes naturally. I love people, and I quite happily have a conversation with people, but I've had to work really, really hard to believe in what I have to offer and believe in how I can make a difference to somebody. And that's totally up to me. And why wouldn't I, with the skill set that I have, with my years of yoga teaching, with the training that I've had, I've done that for a reason, and that reason is to help others and to support others. And so, yes, it's not easy to put yourself out there, because you're also kind of in the back of your head, you do ask yourself, am I good enough?
Yes.
You know, you've got that little voice there, a bit of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just, at a stage, you've just got to say to yourself, look, I've invested this time and this money into my training to have a career change, to help others. And the only way I'm going to be able to help others is if I start having conversations with those people who will hopefully support what I'm doing, but also help me create opportunities to help others. And so that's how I've started to look at what I provide and how I support people. And I've even had a conversation with a private GP clinic on the Isle of Man. And I started my first cancer session. It's a monthly session. It's for free. It's open to anyone affected by cancer. So whether you have cancer, if it's friends or family, and it's a combined cancer session that people can come to once a month for an hour, and we can do whatever people want to do in that hour. It's their hour to make use of it as they wish. So again, it is just about making those connections, and putting yourself out there. And it's not easy. It really isn't. I mean, it took me a whole year to get the confidence to kind of take that first step. But it's all worth it. Once you do that, first step's always the hardest. It's like anything in life, really. And yeah, so that's kind of, so you're right, I've been quite busy, and I'm just extremely grateful that you know, people have been so supportive, and so open, and able to kind of be receiving of what I can offer, in that space.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it took me a long time to get my head around marketing because it always just wasn't my happy space, or you sort of think about like how ethical it is and all of those things. But ultimately, I think what clicked for me is there are people who need help, and I have some skills to help them. So they need to know I exist so that I can help. And it's not about, these kind of manipulative multinational marketing things. It's literally just kind of waving, saying, oh, you need help, I can do that. Did you know that there's someone here who could help? And just putting the need and the service together, because if they don't know you exist, then you can't be helping people. And that's entirely what you kind of redirected your life for. So I'm really pleased to hear. And it was very much my mission as well when I realized the need nationally, globally, even for cancer patients and the additional support that they need. It's like, well, I can't do that for everybody. We need more teachers. So that's why I do the training. So I'm always so happy when I hear graduates are setting up classes and working. I can't teach people on the Isle of Man. So I'm really happy that you are. And that's, I suppose that was my motivation behind all the training in the first place, is that people go out there and support as many people with cancer as possible.
Yeah, and it's amazing what you do and the training that you offer. And I'm not just saying that because I've done the training with you, but you're just an amazing teacher. And you've given us, we all have it in us. That's why we're yoga teachers. We all have, I believe, we're yoga teachers for a reason, because we're compassionate, because we have empathy, because we want to help people. And in all of that, you have an amazing service that people really, really need. 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer in their life.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's a shocking statistic from where it was not too many years ago in reality. And I just think whatever we can do in that holistic space to complement what is available from an allopathic point of view, so from a medicinal point of view, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we bring the two together? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it gives the patient the choice and helps them take back control of their own health and well-being. And I think as a yoga teacher, and specifically the yoga for cancer, there's been a few people in my class where that have affirmed for me that I'm definitely on this right path in this next phase of my life. Not that I doubted what I was doing, but things get tough when you're self-employed, when you're first starting out, and you do sometimes wonder to yourself, am I doing the right thing here? I spent 22 years in the corporate world. I ended my corporate career as an executive on the executive committee, and then through redundancy, I just like, that's it. I'm done with the corporate world. I'm doing something because I love it now and for the service of others rather than for the service of a shareholder's bottom line. And it was a tough transition for me. It really, really was. But at the end of the day, when I've seen somebody come into my yoga for cancer class day 1, and they're now on week 7 or 8 of the yoga for cancer, and they're saying to me, oh my goodness, my neuropathy I really struggled with neuropathy when I started coming to yoga. But my neuropathy has improved so much, and they share that with other people. That is just so rewarding for
It is
me.
hugely rewarding getting.
Yeah, when someone says to me, I used to love yoga, but I've had this diagnosis and it's been an horrendous diagnosis and my treatment, has been really bad. And I didn't want to leave my house because from a mental perspective, I was really struggling. But when I saw this class, I thought I wanted to get back into yoga. And I
Mm.
came to your class, and I'm so glad I did, because that's the one thing that got me out of that dark space, was coming
Mm.
to your class, because it got me out the house. Those are the bits that I was like, well, this is so much more rewarding, Jenni, than
Yeah.
working for a big corporate organization, and that's all money driven. And this is people driven. This is making a change to somebody's life, to somebody's health span, potentially to somebody's lifespan. So yeah, it just fills me with so much joy.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. And I could very easily chat all afternoon with you at time. Um, so I guess just to wrap up, if people wanted to find you, what's the best way they can find you? They wanted
So
to.
they can find, yeah, a couple of ways they can find me. So I do have a website. It's www.healthandbalance, all one word, iom.com. And it's being updated at the moment, but I do have a timetable on there that's got all my yoga classes on. They
Amazing.
can also, I do have a Facebook page. If they wanted to follow me on Facebook, that's more up to date. And that is just Health and Balance IOM is the Facebook page.
Some links
Um,
up for that.
yeah. So website, Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn, all under Health and Balance IOM. So lots of different ways people can find me. And I also have a contact form on my website. So if people wanted to get in touch with me that way, they can do that too.
Wonderful. And with your cancer coaching, can you do that remotely if people are not in the Isle of Man?
Absolutely, yes. So I can do both remotely, really. I can do both my teaching and the coaching remotely, so via Zoom or whatever other kind of program or app works for people. Again, it's all very individual and unique, depending on people
Exactly.
themselves.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for taking some time out to chat with me today. It's been really lovely to hear about all the fantastic work you're doing. And yeah, all power to you. I look forward to seeing your business thriving and serving more people where you are. Um, so thank you for joining me today, Wendy. And we'll put all the links underneath the video so people can click through and find out a little bit more. So
Uh, oh, thank you, Jenni. It's been lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and we'll keep in touch. I'll let you know how it all goes.
yes, yeah. So we'll do this again next year and see how
Yeah.
things go. Oh,
Thank you so much.
afternoon. Thank you, Wendy. Take care.
Bye.